Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about new vehicle transaction prices because we actually have some updates on what's been happening in that market. Before we get into this video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you're going to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. Kelley Blue Book released a report on the average transaction price paid for a new car in the non-luxury segment and also in the luxury segment as well. And it's pretty fascinating because guess what? New car prices are going up yet again. We basically have this graph where new car prices increased exponentially during the pandemic, and then they started to kind of trend downwards, and now they're slightly increasing yet again. So we might be in a situation where we are in a new normal, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the video. But anyways, new vehicle transaction prices in May were up 3% year over year. But something to note, even though they are up, is they are not up nearly as much as what we saw last year. Because last year, when you did the year over year number from May 2021 to May 2022, it was a 13.5% increase. So most of the price increases happened in 2022. The price increase that we just saw this last month, it's modest, at least compared to what we saw last year. So yeah, 3% increase. But with that being said, the average consumer is still paying under MSRP, which is not what we saw last year. Last year, the average consumer paid over MSRP. So we're still in a market where, consumers are paying under sticker price, which is definitely a positive thing. It shows that supply is finally higher than demand. Now, there is definitely a split between the luxury car market and the non-luxury car market when it comes to transaction price increases. With non-luxury cars, they actually have kind of like a stronger increase compared to luxury cars. And a big reason as to why this is happening is just because of affordability and the softening of the luxury car market, and also just the increased production of luxury cars. So non-luxury cars had a price increase of 3.7%, which is obviously above the average that we just talked about. Whereas with luxury cars, the price increases were in the 0.5 to 1.6% range. So luxury cars are not seeing nearly as much price strength as non-luxury cars. And something to note is there definitely is differentiation from brand to brand, because if you look at Jeep, which is a non-luxury automaker, they don't have nearly as much pricing power as, say, Toyota or Honda, for example, that are still struggling when it comes to stocking their dealer inventories. With all of that being said, the luxury car market as a whole is still really strong in the US market. It is 18.4% of the overall market. And so, yeah, luxury car sales, although they're softening, they're still higher than what they're normally at. Now, when it comes to electric vehicles, this is pretty interesting. Prices are down by $9,000 on average year over year. So electric vehicles are pretty much like the most affordable that they have been in quite some time. Now, you'll probably note that, well, if electric vehicles are down in price by such a massive amount, then why is the overall market up in price? Well, it's because electric vehicles only take into are only a small part of the overall market, like 7% in terms of the market share. So even though they've seen huge price declines, 7%, right? Whereas the other 93% of the market has gone up in price. And I'm sure that this is going to continue the trend of EV sales increasing. I mean, year over year, they've increased by 44%, which is stronger than what we see, with most, legacy automakers that are in the 10 to 20% range year over year. Now, despite the fact that we saw a price increase with the average transaction prices, incentives also increased. The average incentive spend right now is almost $2,000. Now, that is quite a bit less compared to what we saw prior to the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, the average incentive spend was like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, depending on the time of year and the automaker. And so we're still not where we were at prior to the pandemic, but we are seeing more incentive spend from automakers. And if you look at the graphs of transaction price and incentive spend is skyrocketing at the same time that transaction price, again, was going down, but again, it's slightly ticked upwards. So let's talk about what this means for the overall car market. Let's start with the luxury car market. I think that we're going to continue to see softening within the luxury car market outside of in-demand models like Mercedes G-Wagons. they're still going to be going for over MSRP on average, but I'm sure that the markups that we're seeing on vehicles like that are going to continue to shrink as the demand pulls back from the luxury car market. But, the regular, quote unquote, run-of-the-mill luxury cars, so think like your BMW 3 Series, Mercedes C-Class, all that, I think that we're definitely going to see continued price softening with these models because the typical demographic that purchases these cars doesn't have a lot of purchasing power in this market. And so, they're going to have to discount those cars quite a bit to convince people to purchase them. So continued softening with the luxury markets, I think that's what's going to happen. And so I don't think we're going to see huge price declines, but I definitely think we're going to see, bigger incentive spend, and we're not going to see nearly as many price increases. Now, when it comes to the non-luxury car market, it just depends on what part of the market you're looking at. If you're looking at expensive trucks and SUVs, yeah, we're going to continue to see bigger and bigger incentives because those vehicles are still struggling to sell. The day supply numbers are still pretty large with those vehicles. But if you're looking at, the more affordable pieces, so think like mid-size pickup trucks, CUVs, SUVs, smaller cars like Honda Civic, Toyota Corolla, all that kind of stuff, there's not going to be incentives on a lot of these vehicles anytime soon because the demand for these more affordable vehicles is still really hot. And so that is going to push up, the average transaction price with some of these vehicles because people are not only going to be paying full MSRP for these cars, no incentives. In some cases, people are going to pay over MSRP for some of these cars. I'm still seeing people pay over MSRP for regular run-of-the-mill cars because they're just hard to find. And so the new car market's going to be split just like the luxury car market, but I guess in the opposite end of the spectrum. With luxury cars, the affordable ones aren't selling, the expensive ones are. With non-luxury cars, the expensive ones aren't selling, and the affordable ones are selling really well. And so if we carry this trend forward, and this is just my guess based on the, guess rather, based on the current information that we have, is that this might actually be the new normal, as depressing as that sounds, right? Where the average new car is like 40-something weeks worth of income for the average American. And that's just because production is still nowhere near what it was like prior to the pandemic. And so we just have a smaller inventory available with new cars. And so with this smaller inventory, manufacturers still have some level of pricing power. Again, it's going to depend on manufacturer to manufacturer and model to model. And so I don't think that we're going to have any sort of, big crash where prices are going to be cut in half. But what I do see happening is on the models that are struggling to sell, we're going to see bigger and bigger incentives. And on the models that are not struggling to sell, manufacturers and dealers are going to take full advantage of that situation, and they are definitely not going to discount them. And again, anecdotally, this is what I'm seeing happen in real time. I'll use a manufacturer that I really like as an example, and that is Ford. If you go into a Ford dealership and you say, hey, I want a deal on an F-150, that Ford dealership will most likely give you a great deal on an F-150. But if you say, I want a deal on a Raptor, they're going to say, get in line, buddy, and you're probably going to have to pay over MSRP. So it really just depends on the product that you're looking at, and again, with the manufacturer as well. And so just understand that, the market dynamics are always going to be the market dynamics. And, obviously none of us can predict the future, but I think that sadly, like I said earlier, we're in a market now where car prices are just going to be higher, and that's just it. So I guess we're all going to have to work a little bit harder if we want to afford that next new car. I'll see you.